Hello everyone, and welcome to today's European SharePoint, Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Laura and I'm delighted to be joined by Nick Doleman, who is a Senior Content Developer for Microsoft in Canada, who will present the topic, Introducing Power Pages. Remember to join in on our conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is #ESPC23. Don't forget to check out the Resource Centre. This is updated daily with the latest blogs, eBooks, webinars, and how-to videos. Simply visit sharepointeurope.com and click the Content tab at the top. Continue your learning by joining us for our next webinar, a step-by-step guide for great user experience in Canvas apps, taking place tomorrow, Friday, January 27th, from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. CET. For full details, please check out sharepointeurope.com/Power Platform Week. Last November, over 2,000 SharePoint, Office 365, and Azure professionals joined us in Copenhagen for ESPC22. We now have an amazing showreel video full of ESPC22 highlights. Visit sharepointeurope.com to watch this brief recap of all the learning, development, networking, and fun that was had over this amazing 4-day event. Next week, we are launching our ever popular 2-for-1 offer on ESPC 23 tickets. This unmissable offer is valid for 1 day only, so be sure to get in early to snatch up this unbeatable deal before it's too late. This is a limited offer, so mark your calendars so you don't miss out on this one-time deal. Make sure to visit sharepointeurope.com next Wednesday, February 1st, to avail of this offer. The ESPC 23 call for speakers is now officially open. Be part of something truly special. Speak and engage with leading experts, IT professionals, developers, and business decision makers at ESPC 23, Europe's premier Microsoft 365 and Azure conference. This is your chance to take a leading role within the conference and the community, sharing your in-depth knowledge, passion, and experience with your peers, in turn helping empower the Microsoft 365 and Azure community to professional success. Please visit sharepointeurope.com/submitspeakespc to find out more. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. Type any question you might have into the questions window. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Centre, where you will be notified by email when it is available. And now I'm going to pass you over to our webinar speaker today, who is Nick. Hello, Nick.
Hey, Laura, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you, Nick?
I'm doing excellent, thanks. So happy to, well, I don't really see anybody, but I do see that we have a lot of participants today, which is really exciting for me because I have been doing Power Pages and Power Apps portals and presentations on the Power Platform for years. And especially on portals, sometimes a few years ago, it was hard even to get like a dozen people in the room, but just seeing virtually a packed house is really awesome. So excited about that, and thank you everybody for coming and checking out this webinar. Hopefully it's very valuable to you today, and we're going to be talking about Power Pages. So if you came for something else, stick around anyway. You might learn something pretty cool. So I'm going to dive right in because there's a lot of cool stuff that I want to show you. Laura, I just want to have a confirmation that my screen is presenting, that people can see it. I should have the PowerPoint page.
Yeah, we can see your presentation there.
Awesome, cool. All right, so let's just dive right in. Who am I? For those of you who may have not know me, my name is Nick Doleman. I am a senior content developer at Microsoft. So basically my day-to-day job is I work on the content that you'll see on learn.microsoft.com, specifically around Power Pages, and we have a team that works on that, as well as I do go into some other areas, been working on some other stuff for the Power Platform admin and a few other places. So that's really my day-to-day job. Plus I do a lot of other content stuff within Microsoft, work with the PMs and the engineers and that kind of fun things. My background is I was an MVP from 2017 to 2021. Of course, Microsoft employees can't be MVPs, so that's why I had to give that up, but that's okay. I'm still a Microsoft certified trainer. And for fun, I pick up heavy things and put them down again. I'm a competitive powerlifter. I'm currently in training in a couple weeks as the Canadian Nationals, and hoping to do well there. So that's kind of a different discussion for another day. If you want to reach out to me after this, if you have questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you do so, just say, hey, I saw your session at Power Platform Week, just so I know where you're coming from. You can follow me on Twitter. I do have a blog. To be honest, I don't update that as much as I used to. Most of my content now shows up on learn.microsoft.com, but still there might be something there useful for you. And then also there is my personal GitHub. It's GitHub/ReadyXRM. I do have a copy of my slides uploaded to there already. I'm sure there'll be a way through the European SharePoint conference to get those as well. But in case you're looking for the deck, you want it sooner rather than later, you can download it from my GitHub. So let's dive into the presentation. Enough about me. I do have to say this disclaimer. I'm a full-time employee of Microsoft, but a lot of these presentations come from things that I've done out in the field prior to joining Microsoft. So some of my ideas, views, and options are my own based in my field. The big translation here is don't get me in trouble. So if it comes up to my boss saying, hey, we saw one of your employees say something at this conference about Power Pages, is this true? I just want to make sure that everything is within context. Anyways, let's go through what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about what are Power Pages, and then I'm not going to talk so much about it. I'd rather show you. So I'm going to build a simple portal app. We're going to provision the site. We're going to take a look at some of those tools. We're going to design and build some web pages. We're going to talk about how that page can interact with data. Security is a big deal when we're talking about Power Pages, so we're going to touch on that and some other things around that, and hopefully be able to answer some of your questions that you might have about Power Pages. So the first question is, what are Power Pages? What is this new thing in the Power Platform that everybody's been talking about? Really, I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's a way to build websites and web applications and mobile apps, like specifically websites. If you've heard of Power Apps Portals, Power Pages is Power Apps Portals. I'm going to reiterate that again because sometimes there's some kind of confusion. Is this a brand new product? It's not. It's actually, there is a rebrand, but it's got a lot more stuff to it, and we'll talk about those things today, such as like the new design studio, the workspaces, there's templates. At the end of the day, what does Power Pages allow me to do? It allows the external stakeholders, so my customers, members, partners, other people outside of my organization to interact with my business systems through a web interface. And building a Power Pages site could be a project on its own. You could have all the interfaces and work with that, or you could use it as part of a grander strategy if you're building an application on the Power Platform. So even if you have like Dynamics 365 or other model-driven apps, you could use Power Pages as a component of a grander project. And that's typically how I've worked on projects in the past. Again, Power Pages is Power Apps Portals. So if you've heard of Power Apps Portals, which has been out for quite a while, Power Pages is like the evolution of Power Apps Portals. And again, the only reason I'm reiterating that is we still get questions in about what's the difference between Power Pages and Power Apps Portals. It's the same thing. The other thing that I really want to kind of drive home a little bit too, because it is a very common question, is that Power Pages runs on Microsoft Dataverse. The site metadata stored in Dataverse, a lot of these components that we will add to a web page talk to Dataverse. If you're building Dataverse-driven, model-driven apps, or even Canvas apps that use Dataverse, some of these components are reused in our Power Pages sites. If we talk about authentication, which we will talk about in part of the demo, the users that will log in and access the web pages and the data, those are stored as contacts in Dataverse, and contacts is part of the common data model that's part of Dataverse. And you can extend sites with other Dataverse capabilities, like using plugins, SharePoint integrations, Power BI. And even if you want to talk to a different data source, you can use Dataverse virtual tables. But again, I want to reiterate, Power Pages runs on Dataverse. I get the questions, hey, can we hook this up to a SQL or to a SharePoint site directly or some other data source? It's like, not directly, it's got to go through the Dataverse. So again, just little things like that I pick up along the way. Want to make sure we convey that. So Talking about Power Pages, we're going to go in and use these tools, but these are some of the new things that have been brought to Power Pages that aren't necessarily there in Power Apps portals. Specifically, we have those tools to build sites. We have the Design Studio. We're going to go into that. The Design Studio is broken up into different workspaces. We have a Pages workspace, we have a Data workspace, we have a Styling workspace, and a Setup workspace. And we'll drill into those as I go through the demo. But really, at the end of the day, for the most part, we could build almost a complete site exclusively within the Design Studio. We still have this other thing called the Portals Management app. And like I mentioned earlier, the portal metadata, that website information, is stored in Dataverse. And what the Portals Management app is simply a model-driven Power App where we can actually take a look at that portal metadata. Now, there are some certain features and more advanced features that we'd still need to use the Portal Management app for. We will touch on that a little bit today in the demo, specifically around setting up users and getting the invites and things sent out. So again, just sort of be aware, again, Power Pages runs on Dataverse. How do we access Dataverse? What's the easiest way? Model-driven app. The other thing is, if you're a pro developer, VS Code and the Power Platform command line interface. So today it's really focused on the makers and using those maker tools, but if you are a pro developer, definitely you can build out and extend Power Pages site using the tools that you love, like VS Code. The command line interface allows you to download that metadata to your workstation so you can work that into your ALM and begin to work on that stuff and re-upload it again. Allows you to migrate from a dev to a test to a prod, etc. Like I said, we're not covering that in today's session. I do have a link here. So again, if you download the deck from my GitHub, you'll be able to see this link. I did a webinar with Daniel Lakowitz, who gave a presentation yesterday. We did a a video about a week or so ago where we went through the Power Platform CLI specifically for Power Pages. So I really encourage you to check out that. That was a lot of fun, do that video with Daniel. All right, so I've been talking, hopefully set the ground a little bit about what Power Pages is. So I'm gonna get out of PowerPoint in a second. I'm gonna talk about the demo. So the first thing what we'll do is, here's the scenario. So Power Platform Week, they did a great job. They built out their website. But what we're going to do for fun is we're going to build our own version of that website for the Power Platform Week, but we're going to use Power Pages, and we're going to exclusively use low-code, no-code techniques to build out that site. I'm going to show you how easy that is. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to get out of PowerPoint, and I'm going to go into basically into my Power Pages homepage. Now, how do we get to Power Pages? Well, basically the link is make.powerpages.microsoft.com. But here's a little something I'm going to share with you all. You could do this today. You can use the AKA-MS link, and it's /Microsoft Power Pages MPP, and this will take you to the Power Pages homepage. Just a quick little shortcut to help you get there. But anyways, I'm going to go back here, and once we go to that Power Pages homepage, right now I don't have any sites in this environment. So like I said, Power Pages runs on Dataverse. You will need an environment, and you will need a Dataverse enabled on that environment. So I have this environment I've set here, and I'm going to create a new site. And we'll just give this a minute here. So when we're creating a site, we have some basic design templates that we could use, some different ones. We also have some scenario-focused templates. So the schedule meetings, the financial institution, there's an after-school program registration, a building permit application. I'm not going to use these today. I'm just going to use my blank site, but I do encourage you to check out those other sites because you can actually see some design patterns that you might want to use and harvest for your own applications. And maybe you do need a building permit site, so we have a template for that. And I know new templates are being added all the time. And then if you were coming from the Power Apps portals world, those Dynamics 365 templates are definitely available for you to use, like the customer service, the partner portal, the community portal, some of those. However, you do need to make sure that your Dynamics 365 is enabled on your Dataverse environment in order to use those templates. So I'm just going to go back. I'm going to pick site design, and it's going to give my site a name and give it a web address. Now, this is fine. I'm just going to stick with this. Down the road, if we want to have our own specialized URL, we can definitely set that up. But for now, this is good, although we could modify that if we want. I'm going to hit done. And now this is going to take a little while to set up the new site. So this process is currently, it could take anywhere from like half an hour to 45 minutes, which I know is incredibly frustrating. And it is for us as well, because it is loading those solutions, it is loading all that metadata. But I can't say too much now, but it is something that we're aware of, and the team is actively working on it. So I'm hoping if I give this presentation again next year, I'll be able to spin up a site a lot quicker. However, we're not going to sit around and wait for this site to come up. I've actually, very much like a good cooking show, the chef has already prepared something earlier. So I'm going to go into another environment, and I'm using the PPP Week 2023. In case you missed it, here's a little aside, like I like to throw in a little extras. If you're kind of worried about, oh, here's another Dataverse environment that I need to spin up and that's going to take capacity, check out the new developer environments. You can create up to 3 developer environments per your user. And what that means is you can build a lot of your applications and it will not consume your Dataverse capacity. So definitely check out the development sites for Dataverse. I know there's been a few tweets and links about that. That's what I did here. I created a development environment and then I've spun up a portal. I did this yesterday. This is the home page. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go directly into edit. And this is loading up what we call the design studio. So here we're in the design studio, pretty straightforward. And now what I want to do is, like I said before, we have the different workspaces, we have the pages, the styling, the data, the setup. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to begin to, it's a what you see is what you get. I'm going to begin to design my site, Power Platform Week. And we could change, the image here. I'm going to upload an image that I got earlier. So here's the logo. We'll stick that in. That's going to upload that into basically a repository of media files. So I'm going to choose this. This is okay. So we've updated that. And I might just do something here. Welcome to Power Platform Week. And what's our call to action? I'm going to edit the button. And this is something we could do later on. I'm sort of like, maybe we're going to create a registration button, that kind of thing. And we'll just go in and change this image here. And I'm just going to, again, upload the European, not that one, this one. No, it didn't like that extension. That's fine. Let me try. Oh, that was the one I wanted. So again, it's going to upload that into Dataverse, into the repository there. So I'm going to choose that. And so we've got a pretty good landing page, and it literally only took me like a minute or two to put together just using those tools. And of course, I could go through, I could begin to add other sections, I could add spacers, I could begin to modify and work with building this web page very quickly. And when this is all good to go, the next thing I can do is let's just hit preview. Let's see what this looks like. And I can preview this on desktop or mobile. And first thing it's going to do, it's going to ask me to sign in. This is something new. This is something we've done a few months ago at Microsoft, is all the sites are going to be protected. They're going to be set to private, meaning you still need to log in with your Office 365 credentials, even to view and preview the site. This is really important because you could have very sensitive data, or even your test data, or maybe there's a design that you don't necessarily want to exposed to the world. So you'll see here, I have a little banner up top saying this site is private. I'm just going to expand the size of my screen a little bit. So this basically means only specific people can preview the site. So a lot of other website building tools have this particular application. So again, if you're building a site, you want to kind of keep it private with your own design group or your own developers, this is something that you can set. And this is pretty easy to turn off. I could make this a public site, and then you could go into this URL and find it for yourself. So again, just wanted to point that out. We take a look here. Okay, this looks pretty good. We have our landing page, but maybe we want to do something a little bit more. We actually want to see all of the sessions that are being presented this week, so you could actually get some more information about them. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to pop back to my design studio, and we're going to go skip over styling workspace for now. I'm going to go into the data workspace. So the data workspace is something that we can create Dataverse assets, meaning tables, fields, and forms. And we're going to use this structure to build out our web application. Now, this is also something brand new that just got released a week or two ago. This is the feature I'm really excited about. Before, when I created assets in Data Workspace, it would go to the default solution within Dataverse. And anytime I've been training people to use Dataverse or to build Power Apps, I'm always reiterating, create a solution to hold all of your stuff. Well, now what we can do in the Data Workspace, you'll see this little gear icon here. I can choose the solution, and I've already chosen the Power Platform Week. I created that solution in Power Apps. You could have any other solution. So this now means that all of the assets that we're creating are going to appear in that particular solution. So this is something I'm really happy to see. When I first saw Data Workspace, that was my first question. I said, this is great. How do I pick the solution? And at that time, that feature wasn't available. It was on the roadmap. So now this is live. So I'm pretty happy to see that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a Dataverse table, and we want to create a Dataverse table to hold a listing of the webinars that are going to be presented at Power Platform Week. So I'm going to create a new table, and let's just call this one for now webinar. And we have the plural name, webinars. I could put a description here. Obviously, I should do that. I can enable attachments and that kind of thing. For now, I'm just going to hit save. And what that's doing is it's creating a brand new table in Dataverse. It's also adding that into our unmanaged Power Platform Week solution. So if I was to go back into Power Apps, I would actually see that solution and I would see those assets. So it's created the table here, and we have the name. So I'm just going to edit the name here. I'm just going to edit that column. As for those of you who've worked with Dataverse know that we do have a name column that shows up automatically. I'm just going to put title and have a single line of text. We can do a few other things if I want. I'm just going to leave that there. And then we also want to capture some other information about the webinars. We want to know some details. So I'm going to add a new column. Let's put in the description column. And this time, instead of text, I want to make that data type multiple lines of text. So here, I'm just going to choose plain text. We could choose rich text as well, because we can enable the component to show that on the web. But for now, I'm just going to choose that as a simple text. So it's adding that column into my Dataverse table. And I'm going to add another column. I'm going to add the date. So the date and time where a particular session is happening. And we'll put that in a date and time format. And we'll make sure all of the time zone stuff is still incorporated into that. Like for all of you in Central Europe, it's I think 3 p.m. in the afternoon. For me, it's 9 in the morning. So we deal in a world where we're dealing with different time zones, especially in these types of virtual situations. And then finally, what I want to do is I want to link to the speaker. Now, instead of just creating a new column for our speaker, what I'd rather do is have that as a lookup to the contact table. And I want to do that for a couple reasons. We currently already have the contact table in Dataverse to store information about people generally. Now, the contact table will also link to the logged in user. So there's something I want to do later down the line where we want our speakers to be able to log into our site. So I'm going to use the contact table to hold my speaker data. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as a lookup. So I'm going to create a new column. I'm going to call this speaker. And the data type here, I'm going to choose Lookup. And where I could choose customer, which would link to an account and a contact, I'd rather just have it to a contact. So I'm going to choose Lookup here. And then in my related Dataverse table, I'm going to just choose contact. And remember, Dataverse, when you install it, comes with a whole bunch of predefined common data model tables, of which contact is one of them. So I've selected contact, and I'm going to save this. And now my table, that particular structure is complete. It's created it in Dataverse. It's added it to that solution. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a view and a form. Now, these are the same types of views and forms that you would create for model-driven apps, but we're going to use these as a basis to build out our web application. So I'm going to go to a view. And I could create a brand new view, but as you know too, when you create a table in Dataverse, it does create some default views. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the active webinars view here. And for those of you who've worked in model-driven apps before, you probably recognize this interface. Whoops, little clicky happy there. So I have the title, and then what I'm going to do is add a column. I'm going to add the description, the date, and of course we want the speaker. I'm going to get rid of the created on column. I think this is okay. I think I want to move the speaker more to the left. I could do a few things here. I could add some filters and things like that. For now, I'm just going to leave this. I'm going to publish my view now. So this particular view has been published the same as we would if we were building a model-driven app. I'm going to go back to my webinar table. And let's take a look at forms. So again, same deal. If we were creating a model-driven app, very similar interface. Again, I can create a brand new form. Here, I'm just going to modify the existing information form. And for those of you who have not worked with model-driven apps, definitely should check those out too. They're pretty cool. A lot you can do there to really quickly ramp up and build a very powerful business application. So here I'm going to add a field. I'm just going to increase the sizes a little bit so you can see we already have the title. We have the owner. Model-driven apps, the forms have to show the owner. I'm just going to drag that up into the header for now. So we have the title. I'm going to add the description, the date, and the speaker. And the speaker, I'm going to, let's just move this guy up. It's all drag and drop. That's cool. The description, I don't want it to be a one-liner because we've seen the descriptions for these sessions. There's a lot there. So I'm going to actually increase the row field height. So I'm going to make this 5 rows. And then again, I can begin to design and do the layout, which probably would make the most sense for our application. I'm going to hit save here. And give that a second. I'm going to publish that form. And then again, this form, that view, that table, that's all part of that solution that I chose earlier. So we're able to, if we were to move this to another site, we could actually move that solution. So we have all this information here. That's great. We've built the view, we've built the form. Now when I go back to the actual table itself, in our webinar table, this is where I can begin to add in data directly. So intro to Power Pages, I could fill in the description, the date, and the speaker. So as opposed to me cutting and pasting directly from the site, that kind of thing, what I've actually done is I've already created another table. This one I've called Sessions. So it's already in my Dataverse here. I'm going to choose this one. And just give this a second. And you can see here, I've already filled in the data on some of the sessions that are being held this week at Power Platform Week. And I put in the description, I put in the date and times. Now for the speakers, I didn't actually pick the real speakers. I just chose the sample data that you would load when you load sample data into Dataverse. Again, I want to protect the personal identifiable information. We're always careful to make sure we're not showing that. So I'm using some of this as sample data. Jim Glynn, Patrick Sands, Maria Campbell. Those are sample contacts I have in Dataverse. So just to quickly recap Data Workspace, we've created the table, we've created the form, we've created the view, and we've also directly added and edited some data here. Now, typically what you would do in a real project is maybe you want to create an interface or even a model-driven app. We could also create some pages to do this. So far, if you've worked with model-driven apps in Dynamics 365 before, I haven't shown you anything really new or innovative. You're already aware of these tools. They're the exact same that you would see in Power Apps. Now let's take this a step further and let's incorporate this into Power Pages. So I'm going to go back to my Pages workspace within the Design Studio, and notice that I have not yet left the Design Studio. I've done everything within it, which is really cool. If you've worked with portals in the past, you probably remember switching to different things, going to Power Apps, going to the Portal Management app, going to a website that had some of those front-end tools. It was just kind of crazy. We're jumping around. This provides us more of a central place, a hub where we could do a lot of our work. I'm going to create a new page. And let's just call this webinars. I'm going to add this page to the navigation, meaning it's going to show up in the menu. I'm going to choose a standard layout. What we can do is we can choose the standard layouts. If we're a pro dev, we could create custom layouts. That goes beyond what I'm going to talk about today, but just be aware, if you're a pro developer, you can create a lot of pretty cool custom layouts using Liquid, JavaScript, CSS, and all those other fun things. For now, I'm just going to hit add. And what that's doing is it's creating this new blank web page. What it's doing in the back end, it's creating that record in Dataverse. So I'm just going to add a text field here. I'm going to call this, webinars. Oh. And from here, I'm going to make this heading 1, make that a little bit bigger. The section's a little big. I can modify this section a little bit. I'm going to change some of the margins and the padding down a little bit just to crunch it up. Maybe I'm just going to add, let's add a spacer in there to make it look good. And then I'm going to add another 1-column section. So again, you can begin to see how you can build out a web page just using the Design Studio. Now, let's actually show some Dataverse data on here. So I can choose a component to add to the section. I have different options here. I'm going to choose list. So I'm going to choose list. And now this is where we're going to be able to expose Dataverse information on a publicly facing website. So the table I'm going to choose is, I'm going to choose my sessions table. Here it is. And I'm going to choose the Dataverse views. So again, we have those views that we modified. I always recommend that you create views specifically to use on your pages. So I'm just going to choose active sessions. I could choose multiple, but I only need one for now. And then I could just name the copy of that list because that is going to be stored as a separate component in my metadata. That's all good. Let's take a look at the data settings for now. For now, we'll just leave these blank. And then number of records per page, because we could have, if we have a table that's full of 1 million records, we don't necessarily want to show that on a page because that would take forever to load. So there is pagination involved. So I'm going to say 10 is good. And then I'm also going to enable the search because that makes it handy for someone to search that data. I'm going to click OK. And then what that's going to do, it's going to begin to render what that list is going to look like on the page. Now, I do have some sample text in here. And the first thing, it comes up with a warning saying you need to set the permission list so it can be seen and used by all your site visitors or limit interaction specific roles. So what exactly does this mean? So when we're building a website, it's very important to consider that, yes, we are exposing Dataverse to the outside world. We want to be very careful with that, obviously, because we might have a lot of private and personal information stored in Dataverse. So we really want to make sure we're very explicit with the permissions that we want to provide or who we want to be able to see. Now, this is the webinars. This is on a public facing site, so this is okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new permission. And this, again, within the Design Studio, I can set this up. I'm going to say webinars for authenticated users. So what I want to do here is I'm only going to allow users that actually sign into the site to view this. Now, I can make this anonymous so other people could view this as well, but for now, for sake of my demo, I'm just going to choose authenticated. I've chosen my table, global access, we'll leave it at that. I'm going to give them permission to read. I could give them permission to other things on our Dataverse, but for now, I really just want them to be able to read that data. And then I'm going to choose the roles. Now, there is like security roles that work very similar to Dataverse security roles, although they are a different construct. By default, we have things like the anonymous users and the authenticated users. I'm going to choose authenticated users. That means any user that signs into our site will be able to view data. I could also select anonymous users, and this is really more for those public-facing users that might come randomly. Probably in this case, in a real-world situation, I would want to set up anonymous users. But for now, I'm just going to leave it for authenticated users. So I've set that up. I've set up those table permissions. And again, that's saving that to the metadata. We have this information here. This looks good. Let's see what this page looks like on our site. So I'm going to hit preview again, choose desktop. And every time that I hit preview, it refreshes the cache. It clears out that cache so we do get the most up-to-date information. Now you see I've gone to this site, and the first thing you see, I've got that webinars link. I'm on that page. I have the title up here, but I have that list, but the list is telling me I don't have permission to view those records. Remember that when we set this up, we set the permissions such that only authenticated users. So I need to sign in to the site as a user. So I'd have a username. What I could do is I could just register. So anybody can come in and set up and create an account. But chances are, if you're building this already on top of an existing Dataverse application, you might already have your customers stored in contacts. So you don't want them going in and re-registering and creating duplicates, because probably a lot of you have worked with duplicate records before and know what a bit of a pain it is to go through and clean up and merge and whatnot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my design studio. And now this is where I need to go into the portal management app. Now I can access that directly going through this little side link here. I'm going to go into the portal management. And this is going to load that model-driven app. And so I'm in here in the model-driven app. And again, this is showing all of our portal metadata. Let me just increase the size of that a little bit so you can see that a little bit better. So we have things like sites. If I even look at things like web pages, we see the active web pages here. See the webinars page that I created. That's showing up here as metadata as well. And I could go in and make some more finite modifications to that. But for now, what I want to do is go into my security section, and I want to take a look at my contacts. So I have a list of active contacts here. Remember, I chose some of them when I was creating that table for webinars as speakers. So here's our friend Jim Glynn. I'm going to go into his contact record in Dataverse. And we see all his information here, you know, his phone number and all that fun stuff. What I'm going to do is, no, I don't want to add the address. Thank you, Google. But what I will do is I'm going to create an invitation. And what that's going to do, it's going to create an invitation that we could use something like Power Automate or even Dataverse workflows to send out an email to Jim for him to get a code to sign up to the site. I'm just going to save this record. By saving that, that's going to trigger a plugin in the back. And so far, everything I'm showing you is out of the box. So I have this invitation code. I'm going to grab that, copy that. And again, normally I would have a flow set up to send this out in an email, nicely embedded. Don't have time for that, but I mean, we have good documentation on how to set that up. I'm going to go to the redeem invitation. I'm going to paste in that invitation code. I'm going to hit register. And now it's going to register that code. You see it pulled up Jim's email address. I'm just going to say his name is jim.test. We're going to type in, you know, typical password, you know, password 123, that kind of thing. Now, I'm using what's the forms-based authentication that comes out of the box. Officially, this is deprecated. We recommend you use something like Azure B2C or some other identity provider. That's probably a whole other session in itself. So for today, I'm just using this out of the box. Registration, I'm going to hit register. And what that's now going to do is it's going to sign Jim into the site. By default, the very first thing is that profile. So again, Jim can update things like his phone number, his email address, and that kind of stuff. Going to just hit update here. So now Jim is signed into the site, and now we've gone into this webinar page. And now that we've signed in as an authenticated user, we can actually see the information here. Now, this looks a little weird. I have a very narrow description column, but a very wide title column. And we have our speaker information. I could search. I'm going to go in and fix that, but really what I wanted to demonstrate to you, that took maybe about 10, 15 minutes, that we were able to get a site set up, we were able to build a page, we were able to get that page tied directly back to Dataverse, where we're showing Dataverse data directly on a website. That's really cool, how quickly we could do that. If we were to build like an Azure application or web app or use some other third-party tools, this would have taken us a lot longer to do. So some of these tools are really great to rapidly build websites. So I have this in here. I'm going to go back to my design studio now. Typically what I probably want to do is go into my session table and fix my view. I don't want to spend a ton of time on that because I want to show you some other cool stuff, and I do have a limited set of time left to do that. So here, let's just make an adjustment. Let's just make this a bit wider. And I'm going to, oh, it's doing some weird stuff. Anyways, welcome to Dataverse. Cool. Anyways, I'm just going to save that. As I'm doing this, I'm going to go back to my pages information here. So what I want to do is, now that we have the ability to see all of this information, the next thing I want to do is give a user the ability to edit, a speaker to edit their own session, but I don't want them editing everybody's session. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another page, and this time I'm going to use that form component to give them an editing experience. I'm going to go here, I'm going to add a new sub page underneath webinars. I'm going to call this edit webinar. And I'm going to start from blank again, click add. I'm not going to put this as part of the navigation because I want to access it through my list component, because it's going to want to know what record. So it's gone through here. I'm not going to spend a ton of time putting titles and whatnot. I'm just going to go right to the form. I'm going to choose a new form. Again, let's look at my session table. Choose this. Going to pick my information form, and I'm just going to call this information edit. What I like to do, sometimes we might have forms for creating, sometimes for read only. This time we're going to edit, so I'm just going to label it that. It helps me keep track of that metadata. I'm going to choose data here, and data from this form, we by default it's set up to create a record. What I'd rather do is update an existing record, but that goes to show you the type of forms that we can create. On submit, what I want it to do, we can have it display a message, but I actually want it to redirect back to my list of webinars, just so it kind of gives a nice user flow. I'm going to shut off CAPTCHA. I find CAPTCHA annoying, but it is important. So I'm just going to shut it off for now. I'm going to click OK. And now we have the form set up here. Now I can actually go and do a few more things. I can begin to edit. I can change the field label, title of presentation. Some of these things are fairly new as well. I can add a description, a custom error message. I could do some simple validation. So there's different things that we could do in the form, and I encourage you to explore that yourself. What I'm going to do is create a new permission here, because I want to be able to allow my speakers to be able to edit that. So here are the webinars for authenticated. Now this time, instead of global access, I'm going to change this to contact access, meaning it's only going to allow those permissions to a contact that's linked to that particular record. So remember, we chose a speaker record earlier. So it's loading the relationship, and hopefully this will chug along a little bit quicker. Here we go. So Dataverse does need a minute to catch its breath sometimes. Here we go. That's the relationship name. Here's the related tables. And I want to be able to write append and append to. We're not going to give the ability to create new sessions or delete sessions. I'm going to leave the authenticated users role. So that's all good. I'm going to hit save here. So now our speakers should have the ability to edit their own presentations only. Now, the other thing I need to do, because remember we have that lookup to the speaker, we're going to have to add an extra table permission for that link to the speakers. I can do that in the setup workspace. And I'm going to go into my table permissions here, and I'm going to go into so yeah, this actually modified the existing thing we had earlier, which is fine. And I'm going to add a child permission. So table permissions can be linked. I'm going to click new. Just going to put on the contact because we do want to work on the contact table a little bit, provide because we do have that link there. And really at this point, once that relationship loads again, I really just want to have the ability to, on the append and the append to. It's interesting that this is taking a while to load the metadata, but of course it's a demo, so it can't go perfect. And here we go, we're going to choose this. I'm just going to hit save. I don't need to pick a role because that role is going to be tied to the parent authentication here. So I have that set up. So now that this has been saved, I'm going to go back to my site. And then the other thing I need to do is how do we navigate to this page? A couple things are going to happen. It's going to need to know the record that we want to view. It's also, has to get a way to get there. So I'm going to access that through my list view. I'm going to go back to my list configuration. I'm going to choose edit list. And again, I'm going to go to this data section. And now what I want to do is open that edit record. And then I'm going to pick that new web page, that edit webinar web page. I've done this, I've set that up, and it's saving this. Everything is saved automatically, which is pretty cool. I'm now going to hit preview, desktop, and again, keeping an eye on the clock because I do want to have some time for questions, as I'm sure some of you have. So now I'm signed in as Jim, and we see here that based on those table permissions, it's actually blocked visibility to only the sites only the presentations that Jim is working on. That's okay. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on, and I now have this edit button automatically. And by doing this, if we look up in the URL, you see that it's passed the GUID across as a parameter. And now we're able to go in and edit, I'll say a great step-by-step guide. We can make some edits here. I'm just gonna put in something very simple like test. We change the date, and then I'm just gonna hit submit. And basically now we're allowing the external user to make changes directly to Dataverse based on who they are. Now we could go in deeper, we can create custom web roles. We could, allow them to view data, but not edit other data, read-only data. There's a lot of different things we can do with table permissions. But moving along, the other couple things that I quickly wanted to show you is the styling workspace. So we have our design here, which I think it's pretty decent. But if you want to design this further, this is where we have the styling workspace. And this is where we can I'm more of what I like to call a citizen designer. I'm not good with CSS and some of those other things, whereas other people are really great at it. So here we could pick different themes. Now we do have some other themes, and then we automatically should see how that looks. This one looks pretty good. And then I could begin to change some of the other things, like the heading 1 here, the Verdana font. Let's change this to something like script. And we see here that automatically it changes. I could begin to change other colors, those types of things, change the buttons, the sections, all of this stuff. I'm going to hit save. And what this is going to do is going to save that new theme into my site. So I've done that. And now if I hit preview our site again, it's clearing the cache, and notice it changed the design of that site. So that was just barely scratching the surface, but if we wanted to, we could go in and we could begin to design things a little bit more in depth using the styling workspace. Now, if you're a CSS type person, we can continue to do this as well with these sites. I can click on Manage CSS, and here I can actually add my own custom CSS files. And once I upload these, I could actually edit them directly in Visual Studio. Now, Question everybody always says, what version of Bootstrap? Today it's Bootstrap 3. If I say that, people are like, wait a minute, Bootstrap 3 is like 1,000 years old. Totally agree with you. If you've read the Power Platform release guide Wave 1 that just got released yesterday, guess what? Bootstrap 5 is coming. You'll be able to build your sites using Bootstrap 5, and if you have existing sites, you'll be able to convert those to Bootstrap 5 with a tool and some guidance. I haven't personally seen a lot of that, how it's going to work yet, but I'm excited about that. So hopefully that answers some of the feedback, let's just call it, that we've been getting. So in summary, I've built this whole site out. I've tied it to Dataverse. We've done a little bit of styling and designing. When I'm ready, the next thing I can do is within the setup workspace, I have this go live checklist. Now, what I probably want to do is move this site from my dev to like a staging or a testing site. And then once we get there, we could do things like running the site checker, picking and allocate licensing. The licensing has changed for Power Pages. It's way better now. We can convert that site to production, enable content delivery networks. That's just going to make your site run faster. We can set up some firewalls to make it more secure. Of course, create a custom domain name. And then finally, we can turn that site on, set it for public, so we don't need to actually log in. Like authenticated users will still need to log in, but in terms of our own staff working on that site, we remove that login capability so everybody can view it. So I was trying to finish this and trying to make sure that we had about a good 10 minutes for questions. Laura, was there questions that came through that that folks are desperately wanting me to answer?
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. So just before I get into the Q&A, I just want to say thanks for a great presentation and for a great hour of learning all about Power Pages. Um, so I'll just get straight into the questions now. The first one I can see here, someone is asking, can someone explain what is available for non-profit organizations for Power Pages in terms of license costs, etc.? It is interesting for non-profit, however, it is costly.
Great. I'm not a licensing expert, but I do know that there is nonprofit pricing available. I think the best resource I'd say if you have a Microsoft rep or get in touch with one to say and give the situation, and then hopefully they can actually find you that non-for-profit pricing. I don't have visibility into that. When I worked for a partner, we'd have the sheets and we would know. And then of course there's a whole application process as well. So that would be I guess the best channel. So I guess the short answer is yes, nonprofit pricing exists. I'm not the person to ask on how to get it, but great question though.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nick. Now, the next question I have here says, is there a Power Pages developer subscription plan or a free plan? Again, another pricing question.
Fair enough. So yeah, we are recording this, but this goes back to my first slide. Don't get me in trouble. As you know, there is the developer environments that you can get. If your organization already has a Power Apps subscription, a couple things, couple ways you could do this. First off, if you're already subscribed to using Power Apps, you have Power Apps licenses. If the site is set to private mode, like my site is here, this does not consume any licenses. This is a private site, and then you'll be able to continue to develop and work on that without consuming any licenses. So you do have developer environments and that type of thing. Also, if you have like a Power Apps per user license, then you also have some use rights to view sites, to work with sites that way for yourself to access this. Now, if it is going to be publicly available, if you're going to build a site where people, just random users, are going to access this anonymously, that is where the licensing will kick in. Now, the other thing is you can set up a 30-day trial. So this is the caveat of don't get me into trouble. After 30 days, that site is going to expire. That being said though, here's a little trick. And again, this is a don't get me in trouble trick. So if you didn't hear it from me, but you can still today go into Power Apps. And I'm just going to go into an environment that I know has some old portals kicking around that this one here, if we go into apps, what I can do is I can still create a new website. And this is the old way we used to create portals. But basically here you can use data from an existing website record. So if you have a portal that has expired, it will not delete that backend metadata. So you could choose this, and then you could pick one of those sites that have expired, and you could basically recreate your site. So I'm not recommending you do this, but if you have to work on something and 30 days later you want to work on it some more, the URL will change, but this is something that could be done from a developer testing, learning perspective. Do not use this for production. Do not get me in trouble. But good question.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Nick. So just another question here. Someone is asking, they're saying they're currently working through a tutorial on Power Pages, but for some reason, when they go into portal management and try to configure some of the components on the basic page, for instance, drop-down controls that should display the list of tables are not showing up. They
Oh,
tested
interesting.
this in 3 different tenants, but still are having the same problem. Is it a known issue, or maybe is it a browser problem? They're wondering.
That's a great question. And you know what? I have seen that before, and I think I know the issue that you might be experiencing. So I would recommend a couple things. So let's just go on that list. Here is that active sessions. And again, I'm keeping an eye on the clock that we make sure we get through some more questions, but this is a common thing. So they're probably running into this, where this is giving an error message and not working. I have seen that before. So a couple things. The first thing that I would do, quite honestly, is go into AKMS PPAC, which is the Power Platform Admin Center. And hopefully this goes relatively quickly, but there is a way to update what we call portal packages. This is currently a situation where you need to do this yourself. So this is something that you should do on a regular basis. So here is, let me see if I go into an older portal, if I go into this one, and if I go into the environment, and sorry, if I go into, actually I want to go back a step here. I select this. They keep moving things on me. This happens. Anyway, sorry, I don't want to spend a ton of time, but basically, oh yeah, Power Pages sites. Give me a second here. So if I pick a site that I have set up here, it's going to say check portal packages for upgrade. There is a chance that your site might be out of date. So what I would recommend you do is check this out and make sure that you've updated all the recent packages. So I'm just going to go here. It's going to go into details. Oh, tell me there's a problem upgrading the portal. But anyways, so here there's a new version available. This might resolve that problem. If it doesn't, open a support ticket and get them to work through with that, because this probably will fix it. But if it doesn't, open a support ticket. And of course, always make a backup of your Dataverse environment before doing anything like this. Hopefully that gets you in the right direction.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Nick. So another question here, can I filter a list by the user who is logged in? Like a list with a lot of project from different customers, and they shouldn't be able to see other records in the project list.
Yeah, and that's exactly in my demo that I did. So when I set up, there's two ways, well, multiple ways to do it. But the way that I did it in this particular site, where am I at here? I did that in the using by the table permissions. And I know I probably buzzed through that pretty quickly, but when you set up the table permissions like I did on the webinar, and then I did that table permission based on the contact, that basically was my filter here. So let's just go quickly look back. I chose the access type as contact access, and then I filtered that based on the relationship, so that contact lookup. And before, remember, we had 4 sessions in my list, and then when I turned this on, we were down to just 2 sessions, I believe. So that was effectively the filter that got set up. So we have 1 session, 2 session, and they only belong to Jim. So that would be sort of the best prescribed way to do that. There are other ways to do that. You can actually, within the list metadata, there are filters that you could basically I think there's filter conditions based on the portal user attribute. This is kind of an older way to do it, but that's another method. And then there is a way that you can actually filter it using through the Dataverse view editor. There's information on our site of how to do that as well. So hopefully that points you in the right direction there as well.
Great, Nick. So just another question in here. In which use case will you define more forms for a table?
Oh, that's a great question. So let's say, for instance, I had, for this webinar one is a good one. We wanted to have, let's say, the speakers being able to edit this particular form. So I could set up a form where I'd have the title and the description, but maybe we don't want the speakers to edit the date or even their own speaker record. But let's say we had an event organizer. So we would create an event organizer web role, and then we would create a form that could have the date and the speaker ability on that as well. So we might have a different situation there where we'd use a different form, and then when they drill down into that based on their web role, they would see that form, or we could actually write some liquid to switch out the form. So that would be a use case scenario where I would use different forms, and there's probably a bunch of others.
Brilliant, Nick. And there is a couple of more questions here. So if you don't mind staying on, I can run through all the questions just so everyone can have their question answered, if that's okay with you.
I have no place to go, so I'm good. So go for it.
Brilliant. So the next question is, can you integrate documents that a user dropped into Microsoft Teams SharePoint to a Power Page automatically?
Not automatically. A couple of different ways to do this. If they're doing it there, then based on limited knowledge of your use case, what I would probably use is Power Automate. And then a couple things I could do is I can actually, we do have guidance on our Learn documentation of how to embed a SharePoint document page that's linked to a Dataverse record, and we can expose that on the portal so they can upload and download documents. The other thing I could conceivably suggest is setting up a Power Automate to copy that particular document into a file field or even into an Azure Blob storage, and that you could also surface on the web. So not automatic out of the box, but there is ways to do it, and I think fairly painlessly just using low-code methods. So again, hopefully that steers you in the right direction, or at least things to consider.
Great, Nick. Thanks again. So another question, how can we reset the password of the contacts if they want to do it from Power Pages using local sign-in? Is there an out-of-the-box functionality, or should we implement a custom flow?
Good question. If you're using the out of the box, how should I say it? Using the out of the box methods, there is actually an out of the box way to change that password here. So you would go in, put the old password, new password, confirm password. Some of the workflows that are part of the system actually, so they could actually do a request and get that sent to them. So there is, for that standard sign-in procedure, which I'm just going to mention, it is deprecated, but it just works out of the box, right? So there is methods here out of the box on how to reset passwords. And then you could reset it directly within the portal management app as well, but that always is a little dicey where, yeah, you don't want to, if the bank calls you up and said, well, just give us their password or give you the password over the phone, we don't want that. But there is that capability here as well to change the password, but this is from the internally driven, but the site does have the ability to do that. And we should have documentation on that as well. But great question. And then, sorry, one last thing on that. If you were to use an external authentication provider like Azure B2C, or tie it into your Facebook or LinkedIn or something like that, that's when those mechanisms, they have their own password reset procedures. So that's one of the benefits of using an external identity provider. You don't need to worry or even store passwords because it's being authenticated by a third party. So just something to keep in mind. You really should look at authentication methods if you're rolling out a portal and looking at a real live project.
And speaking on authentication, someone here is asking how to set up multi-factor authentication on Power Pages.
Oh, it's a good question. There's a lot to it. I'm gonna have to point you to our documentation on this one. If you're struggling with the documentation, then definitely leave a comment on that if you have questions. I get those comments. The other thing is if that doesn't help either and you're in a bit of a rush, again, open a support ticket. But to me, to sit down and explain how to do multi-factor authentication, I have extra time, but I don't have like probably the hour or 2 hours to do it. So. Let's just say the
Brilliant,
info is
Nick.
there.
Great, thanks a million for that. So another question is, are there start themes with all the properties one can change outside of using this GUI?
Oh, you mean that like so in terms of the designing of the page or something, I think is what the question is. Like, can you use something else beside the design studio? So yes. The quick answer to that is everything that I have done here on this user interface, I could do it directly in modifying information here directly in this model-driven app. Now, I would almost say this is the way we used to do it in the old days before these studios came out, and that was really back in the AVX Studio days where this product came from. That's one way to do it. This is extremely painful. I don't recommend it. However, the one that could be done too is there's a tool called the XRM Toolbox, which hopefully all of you know about. That has some built-in tools to more modify some of that back-end source code. We also have VS Code using the Pack CLI. We can actually download our web page metadata and then work on that and re-upload it. The other thing that I didn't show you because I didn't have time is there is an edit code button here. So here I can open up Visual Studio Code and directly work with the source code there. Now, in terms if you have other like HTML designers and things like that, at the end of the day, the backend is still HTML. It is using a markup language called Liquid. So if you do have tools that can work with HTML and Liquid and some of those other things, and you could create those, and then you could create your own custom page templates and that kind of thing. So the short answer is yes, you can. Which ones? I've usually just worked exclusively more with VS Code because I'm more come from a developer background. But if there are tools out there that work really well that you've tried out and created web templates with, I'd be more than happy to hear about it. So hopefully that gives a little bit of food for thought anyway.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Nick. So another question here. Someone's asking, is there a way to make the sync timing between Power Pages and Dataverse less than 15 minutes?
Is that Oliver asking? I no. So this is something that we do get asked a lot. So what just give a bit of background on that question. What that means is if someone were in Dataverse, like we had that, for instance, that webinar table, and let's say we have a model-driven app, and then someone were to update that information in the model-driven app, or even a Canvas app, talk to Dataverse, that would not necessarily be reflected on that webinar page that we had for a minimum of 15 minutes. That is because it has to go through a whole caching procedure. If we were to send out each and every update, that could really bog down your portal. So that's why it exists. The question is, but there are some use cases where we do want to have that information appear more quickly. There's a couple of tricks that are out there. One of them is you can make sure is one of the, if you're setting up a list view, if you could set it to a date field because the date field is constantly changing. So that you could actually put a filter that show where if it's greater than a certain date, because that's one way to refresh the data. And I think that has been documented in a blog somewhere. A few years ago, I also wrote out a blog where you could use the portal's web API. That's more of a pro dev thing. If you actually have the portal write data back to that Dataverse or update a field, then the next time you're going to expose that list, it will actually refresh that data. So that's one of my more popular blog posts. And again, like I said, I haven't updated my blog lately, but I do have a blog post on that. And that it is, at the end of the day, I'm just going to be honest, it is a it is a hack. So I'm just going to see if I can find that. That is, let's see, cache. Do we have that? Yeah, use Power Apps Portal's web API to clear the portal cache. So look up that blog article as a bit of a workaround to get that, to do that 15-minute thing. So again, at this point, there is no ability to write something to force that cache to happen from a programming, or there is user interface ways, but no way to make that happen automatically, unfortunately. But there's reasons for that. So hopefully that helps.
Again, Nick, so just a couple of more questions. One person is asking, can you implement fluent user interface color themes with PowerShell?
Ooh, that's probably a little bit out of my league of knowledge. I probably can't answer that adequately. So I would suggest that for that kind of question, maybe throw that on our, we have a Power Platform, a Power Pages community site at Microsoft. Put the question there and hopefully someone will be able to answer that one for you.
Great, thanks, Nick. So another question is, can we change the URL without the mention of Power Apps Portal?
Yes, there is, as I went through in the setup workspace, we do have guidance on that. What you will need is an SSL certificate. And there's instructions on how to upload that. And then you have your custom domain, you connect your custom domain. So that could be, you know, www.abccompany.com or whatever you want. And then that way you're not using that Power Apps Portals domain, or even the old Microsoft CRM Portals domain.
Brilliant stuff. So just 2 or 3 more questions left.
Sure.
So one person is asking if they can filter a list with another parameter that could be passed in the URL, that could be passed in the URL parameter.
Yes. Yeah, so you could, like, I know we were filtering on the contact, but you could add in that filter. Again, this is one of those things that probably a lot of steps to figure out. I'm going to refer you back. There's actually, I'm going to go to, and again, this is learn.microsoft.com and /Power Pages. And this will take you to our documentation. I'm actually going to, in this particular case, we still have a lot of our documentation. Part of my projects right now is to migrate over to Power Pages. So some of this stuff still exists in it still exists in Power Apps. So I'm going to go here, Liquid Overview. I'm just going to get to your question. So I'm going to go here. This is going to pop me back to our Power Apps documentation, which will still exist, but the links will eventually begin to pop over. There is a topic here, because I was working on that the other day, create custom templates, create a custom, render a list for a page. If you can see this, it's render the list associated with this current page. This topic goes through using an entity list. So I think what you'd be able to do is use the parameters. If you're a pro dev, pass that parameter as a filter and then build this into this particular view. The other way to do it is you could embed fetch XML. We're going into some pretty deep dev topics here. The short answer is yes, it can be done. But then this is where we're getting into more of the pro dev stuff and building custom templates and things like that. But definitely is doable, and hopefully we have enough guidance out there to help you along with that.
Brilliant, Nick. And just on to the last question now. Someone is asking, is there an out-of-the-box functionality to allow contacts local signed in themselves to reset the password?
Locally signed in themselves to reset the password. Going back, so if I'm here, so I think if I'm signed in here with Jim, I have the ability here, if I know my old password, that I could actually go in and put a new password here. I have a distinct feeling that there might be more to this question, but this is something that's out of the box that they can change their own password here without any intervention or requesting or things like that. If it's a case of they don't know their old password. So let me just sign out here. And this actually might be more the question is, I'm just signing out. The forgot your password, again, that's an out of the box thing. If they click here, what this will do is they put in their email and that will send them a password reset, which will point them back to a page that will allow them to reset their password. Now, this again is another reason why using a third-party identity provider probably works so much better, because they have all these other tools and multi-factor authentication things, which we can integrate here, but sometimes let something that's been dedicated to do that. Hopefully this gives the information that's required.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nick. It looks like you answered their question because they did state if they were logged out and forgot the password. So
Okay, perfect, cool. All right,
looks
I'm
good. Yeah.
overthinking it.
Brilliant. So that's all the questions we have today. So just on behalf of the ESPC community, Nick, we just want to extend a huge thank you for coming in today and for taking the time out of your day to carry out this webinar. We really do appreciate it.
Oh, no, my pleasure. I'm glad, and thanks everybody who attended and stayed to the end as well. That's awesome. So looking forward to seeing all the cool sites that everybody's going to be making.
Brilliant. So this is the end of today's webinar, folks. You can find this webinar and more at sharepointeurope.com/resource center. So thanks again to everyone for joining us today. Take care and goodbye.
Thank you.